the recording has begun.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is the American Rescue Plan Demolition Revitalization Program, request for information, informational session. And welcome, everybody. We're excited to go through this presentation today. I'm going to, well, my name is Bill Walterscheid. I'm the division manager here of Code Enforcement with St. Louis County Department of Transportation and Public Works. And I'd like to everybody, the panelists, to self-introduce themselves. I'll let Stephanie go next.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Stephanie Leon Streeter. I'm the Director of Transportation and Public Works for St. Louis County.
Morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Welch. I'm with Deloitte and supporting St. Louis County through the various COVID relief bills. But I'll pass it over to Amy and Dickie as they'll be facilitating the majority of the conversation. So Amy, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Chu. I'm a manager with Deloitte, and I've been working with St. Louis County on the American Rescue Plan strategy and the projects. And Dickie. It looks like Dickie is having connection issues, but he...
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Sorry for that awkward delay, but I've been working with Amy in St. Louis County for a couple of years now, helping put together the strategic spending plan on how to spend these funds in the places that can really benefit the most across the county. So really, really happy to be here and to move forward with this project. And can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we can progress through the agenda unless there's anybody else that needs to give an introduction.
I think that was everyone. Yeah. So real quick for today, we just did our introductions, and we're going to go over the St. Louis County's Demolition and Revitalization Program, which the RFI is about. And then at the end, we saved plenty of time for questions and answers. And so we can go ahead and dive right in. So for today, this is an info session about the RFI. And we're really here to discuss any questions that people might have about the RFI itself. We're happy to answer more questions about the program as well, but that's kind of the goal for today. Throughout the program, if you have questions and you want to you can drop them in the chat as you think of them. We're going to address all of the questions at the end after our presentation, but we won't lose track of them if you put them in the Q&A box. And then at the end, we'll also open it up for questions. And then also, as we noted at the beginning, this session will be recorded. So if you want to go back and review something, or you want to share it with colleagues that maybe were unable to attend, this will be made available on the county website under the Department of Transportation and Public Works tab. Okay, next slide.
Great. So the RFI really goes a little bit more into detail around the context surrounding the RFI, but we just want to give a brief overview. So currently there are over 1,100 vacant and abandoned properties across St. Louis County. A lot of these vacant and abandoned properties have been in the state for quite a while, and some of them really represent some public health and safety concerns to the surrounding communities where they are located. The reason why we're putting together this RFI is really because a formal process for the county to be able to identify these vacant abandoned properties, inspect them, enter into the county hearing process. It's a very time-intensive process, and even following that hearing process, the property owners still maintain ownership of that property. And so, so really these vacant and abandoned properties to the county, to TBW, really represents a huge opportunity to make some transformative impacts in the communities where they're located. So it's not just about eliminating potential hazards for those neighborhoods, but also trying to leverage those demolished lots to be able to provide a broader revitalization and community impacts where they're located. So this is a slide just briefly outlining a timeline of how we got to where we are now, right? So the federal government awarded St. Louis County, like all other state and local jurisdictions, funds, in the case of the county, is $193 million in order to allocate according to pandemic response and recovery efforts. Now there's a broad slew of eligible costs included within these funds, but really the work that the county has done to date is really conducting community needs surveys, town halls, hearing from constituents where these funds should be best applied, what their needs are. And then based off of that information that was gathered, the county council determined allocations and project investments based off of those priority needs and where they felt like these funds could really make an impact. So part of that are the funds that we're talking about right now, right? The county dedicating $11 million to fund demolition activities for vacant and abandoned properties, just given the sheer volume of properties that there are across the county. And again, the dangers that they present, but also the opportunities that they also present for community impact. So this RFI was really published in hopes of trying to work with others within the community to catalyze this vacant and abandoned property demolition and revitalization process, just given the expertise of others and potentially interested applicants. Amy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. And so that kind of puts into context the request for information that the county has put out. Is that under the requirements of the American Rescue Plan State and local fiscal recovery funds, demolition activities are an eligible cost so long as they're paired with revitalization. And revitalization kind of requires a little bit more ownership than is allowable in the county's current demolition process. And so where the RFI has been issued to kind of have a better understanding of what other options there are for these funds. So the county is looking to partner with organizations to help with both the demolition and the revitalization of these vacant and abandoned properties. The goal is to improve public health and safety outcomes. Ideally, these project partners would purchase the property, and then because they own them, they can then demolish and revitalize the properties, and will provide some funding support for that. The goal of this $11 million is to maximize and demolish as many vacant properties and revitalize the neighborhoods around them as much as possible. The revitalization must take place on those demolished properties, but they can also incorporate the neighboring community. So it's not limited to the property that's been demolished. And we're just looking for additional context and kind of feedback from the community and different organizations that might be able to help us carry out the program as intended by both the county and the Treasury Department. Sorry, go ahead.
So again, the RFI details the eligible activities as well, but we just wanted to give a brief overview. So the fiscal recovery fund dollars, the eligible costs are really divided by what Treasury calls expenditure categories. And again, there's a plethora of expenditure categories. The one specific to this project is expenditure category 2.23. Now there's a typo in the RFI, I believe. I think it says 2.22, but for those who have actually looked through the fiscal recovery funds, the final rule, the reporting guidance, etc. This is the expenditure category that these funds are aligned to. And as such, we're listing here just some examples that Treasury provides for what would be included within, eligible activities. So again, we talk about, as Amy mentioned, demolition of vacant and abandoned buildings, but that demolition has to be paired with some sort of revitalization in order for those activities to be considered eligible. So you can't just demolish and leave it at that. There has to be a follow through with what else you intend to do with the property that would better the surrounding neighborhood in terms of, public health, recreational safety outcomes. So this also includes, right, rehabbing those properties. Again, as Amy mentioned, this, it's not just limited to demolition. Funds can also be used to acquire said properties in order to follow through with the demolition and revitalization. And we've seen, across some jurisdictions in the United States, there are a lot of creative uses that are being done. So, for example, there are groups of vacant properties that have been identified, acquired, and converted into affordable housing, for example, or expansion of parks and green space for neighborhoods where that are located really far away from any available green space. And so these are just some of those eligible activities. This is a non-exhaustive list. And so it's really all about, right, whenever you're thinking about what to do with a demolished property, once that demolition has taken place, it's really about whether that project idea falls within that same kind of general framework, right? The idea that there are a lot of vacant and abandoned properties that present, right, public safety or public health concerns, and that they also represent that opportunity in order to provide some sort of community benefit and impact post demolition. So again, just wanted to mention that as these are federal funds, and we're talking about capital expenditures, right? We're talking about property acquisition, we're talking about demolition, and any sort of site improvement that might take place. They're also that this project and these activities would be beholden to federal capital expenditure compliance requirements, which obviously we could get into at another stage of this process, but wanted to mention that in addition to that, some uses and revitalization activities would not be eligible if they did actually work counter to the intent of the fiscal recovery funds, right? So if this demolition and revitalization were to exacerbate housing insecurity, for example, then that would not be an eligible use of the funding. So another piece of the eligibility criteria here for the demolition and revitalization of properties across the county is that those properties that are identified must be located within qualified census tracts in order to be eligible. Now, this is because within the Treasury guidance, there are expenditure categories that are broadly applicable to the public, but then there are also expenditure categories like this category where it can only be used within what Treasury terms disproportionately impacted communities. And geographically, those are communities that are located within qualified census tracts. There's no limit to the property size or the number of properties for demolition and revitalization activities. The county has put together a vacant and abandoned property mapping tool that identifies a lot of these properties. This is not an exhaustive list, so it doesn't have to be within the property mapping tool in order to be an eligible property, right? If you yourself have identified properties that may not be on that list that do fall within a qualified census tract, but also, as we mentioned in RFI, priority will be given to unincorporated areas of St. Louis County, which obviously by nature, you're already going to see overlap between the qualified census tracts and those unincorporated areas. Bill, do you want to speak through the vacant and abandoned property mapping tool?
Yes, we created this vacant and abandoned property mapping tool, and it's located in our RFI by a link. When you first click onto it, you'll see the entire St. Louis County, Missouri area with the council districts noted. As you zoom in using the plus sign up in the top left corner, you'll start zooming in on the properties and you'll see a lot of purple. Those are the qualified census tract areas that where we have to stay within those bounds. So as you zoom in a little closer, you'll start seeing some properties that are shaded in red. They are the current properties we have noted in our demolition program that we administer here at in the St. Louis County Department of Transportation and Public Works. The yellow shaded areas within the map have hatches and cross hatches, are basically just identify vacant buildings. The hatching is also something that we are using to determine eligibility when we have to use our demolition program. Please bookmark this link because we're not done yet. We still need to move into other qualified census tracts and note those vacant properties. So this map will be changing frequently throughout the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, so additional project considerations that we encourage are to, like, the projects we're looking for should be informed by community input. As Dickie mentioned earlier, all of the ARPA dollars were informed by community needs survey with conversations with the community. And so it's really important to continue to engage the community as we develop the details of our projects. Especially the neighborhoods that are surrounding the abandoned properties and the neighbors that will be impacted. We're also looking for projects that are going to be equitably designed and really thoughtful and intentional about the social and economic impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods. As Dickie mentioned earlier, a housing project that kind of ends up displacing a lot of the neighborhood because the new housing stock is at a different price point would not be in the spirit or aligned with the goals of these funds. As a reminder, these are federal funds coming through the United States Treasury, and so there are rules and regulations that govern the ARPA dollars, and specifically around capital expenditures. But the county works with each subrecipient or contractor, and we'll walk you through that process. But just wanted everyone to be aware that if you've worked with the county before, there's an additional layer of requirements that will apply. And then finally, again, because these are federal dollars, there's federal terms. And one of those terms that's really important is that all of the dollars must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and then spent by December 31st, 2026. So it's a pretty tight timeline for moving a significant amount of money, and just wanted to flag those things for consideration as you all develop responses to the RFI.
Yeah, and just to note on the first 2 points that Amy mentioned on the slide with regards to community input, the county would be really interested in hearing from y'all as to any further insight, connections that you have with those community members and input that you've received, feedback on what they feel would be most beneficial to their communities when looking at these funds. And so the RFI would really like to hear back, the county would really like to hear back from you with regards to that feedback and that engagement that you have with community members. And just to give an example, when we talk about equitable design that these projects have to uphold. So again, say that you have a project proposal and you're looking at these a group of vacant and abandoned properties that you're seeking to acquire, demolish, and let's say rehabilitate into affordable housing stock within that neighborhood. That's great, and that's in line with the spirit of the fiscal recovery funds. But at the same time, if we have within the broader neighborhood, if you're seeing some sort of home degradation, or a lot of homes in need of repair, then the purpose of these revitalization funds and the whole point about these funds being equitable is that those benefits should also expand to existing residents who are trying to, let's say, maintain their properties, their homes, but may need funds in order to help them rehabilitate or conduct home repair, weatherization, etc. So just wanted to point out a specific example as to, when we talk about community input and we talk about equity, this is kind of what a project would look like in that sense. So this is just a quick summary of what we've gone over and what the RFI spells out. So again, the county is seeking input from y'all to gather information and inform decision making with regards to this project to address vacant and abandoned properties within St. Louis County. There's a total of $11 million in fiscal recovery funds allocated. So the county's really looking to experienced respondents who have that capacity and those qualifications and track record of really, you know, being creative and designing and implementing projects that actually will translate into a positive community impact for those qualified census tracts within the county. And so, again, since the county itself is cognizant of its own capacity, right, its own time constraints, its own expertise in being able to handle the demolition processes and the limitations that we've discussed previously with regards to ownership of other properties and the extent to which the county would be able to revitalize just isn't really leveraging the opportunity that exists with these funds to conduct that revitalization. So running through the timeline, the RFI was released on the 20th. Today is the information session. Following this information session, any other questions that we have that we may not answer on this call or that we do answer on this call, we'll be sure to send out a document to those who may not have been able to attend that will outline answers to whatever questions we receive. Responses to the RFI were due. And again, any further follow-up questions or clarifications, please reach out to Bill. We have his email here and his phone number. Loves to talk on the phone, so just reach out whenever. With that, we can launch into the questions. Now, this is a slide, a very busy slide, but we wanted to capture all of the questions that were asked in the RFI. First to ask, right, everyone that's attending this session, if you have any questions or require clarification with any of the questions that are asked in the RFI of you. So we'd like to start there, but we're also happy to field any other questions that may fall outside of the RFI that could also clarify, right, the county's intent and the purpose of this RFI for you. So with that, I'll stop. I can leave the screen up to list the questions. Happy to stop here and see if there are any questions from participants.
Yes, I got a question in the chat. Is there a website for the RFI? Yes, there is. It is located at stlouiscountymo.gov. So that's STLOUISCOUNTYMO.gov. You'd want to navigate to the through the government tab and then go to the Department of Transportation and Public Works, and you'll see the RFI redevelopment opportunity announcement at pretty much at the top of that page. There's a second question in the chat. Is there any way I can obtain a list of all the properties? We are looking at compiling a list of all the vacant properties currently in unincorporated St. Louis County that will have to coordinate with those qualified census tracts. We don't have it at this point, but we do intend to have a list of those properties soon.
We also wanted to mention if there's anybody who's having trouble with the chat function and would like to say their question out loud, then please let us know, and Rick will be able to unmute you if you're unable to write that question in the chat.
To follow on Bill's point, regardless of a list, the map that we mentioned and for which there is a link in the RFI would give you not only a visual of the vacant properties, but it would show you where in the county they're located and give you parcel information, I believe, or address information and street information. So it is visible in that way where we're talking about the vacant properties as they relate to the qualified census tracts. I'll reiterate again that if people don't today have questions or don't feel comfortable to ask them, questions are still accepted through July 14th. Recognize in the RFI that your subject header, if you email it or you present it in hard copy form, is the subject line is noted in the RFI, and you can direct those questions to Bill. His contact information is in the RFI, so we will continue to take questions and answer questions that you might have.
I see a question from Rachel on what will be the next step after the RFI deadline. Stephanie, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, so after we get questions first and respond to those, and then folks that want to submit information in response to the questions in the RFI by the due date, we will reflect on that information. It will help us be informed on how we establish a more formal scope of work for a request for proposal solicitation. I don't have that specific date yet because we need to see what information we gather and how that feeds our process from the community, but it will not drag on too long because we're all very cognizant of the deadlines that everybody would be under. So we would work to do that as quickly as possible and get that posted, get the RFP posted.
I know there's been some questions surrounding the mapping tool. I know we have a little bit of time. I'm happy to kind of walk through that actual mapping tool if someone wants to see just the functionality of what you would be looking at. Yes, and we can address your question, Maud, when we're doing that walkthrough. Thanks for prompting me.
Dickie, you want me to pull that up?
I can do it. You can talk through it, Bill, and I'll just kind of work on the screen. Can everybody see the screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So, Bill, feel free to jump in here whenever, but as Bill mentioned, the further you'll have these layers that are noted. The layers that are shown that aren't faded out, right, that are in clear black text are the layers that are accessible at your current zoom level. So the further you zoom in, the more of these layers are visible. So for example, as Bill mentioned, right, the purple that you see here shaded are the qualified census tracts that you would be looking within. So zooming in into Council District 1, for example, the further you zoom in, you're going to start to see the other layers pop up. Right. Let me see if I can get some of these off so it's a little bit clearer to look at. Bill, is there a certain section that I should be zooming into?
Yes, if you could drop down the no, go up,
Yeah.
and drop down the selected demolition parcels, and then also drop down the menu for vacant demolition percentages.
Okay.
Correct. Oh, and vacant parcels, good. That's another drop down menu.
Great.
If you could drop down the vacant parcel 2022 menu in the checkbox display.
Okay.
And I find it easier to pull off the qualified census tracts. The purple
Sure.
tends to override a lot of things. But now, if you could zoom in maybe to the Castle Point area is a
Yeah.
good area that we could look at.
Okay.
And
So
so,
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
the red properties are currently in our demolition process that we do internally. And we're using a different set of funds for that. Uh, it's a long process. So our internal demolition process, we have to first identify buildings that are over 50% damaged in accordance with the market value of the structure. Once we do that, there's hearings involved, and then we proceed to actually demolish the building. Um, our our processes takes a long time, 6 to 8 months to go through, and we are following a parallel track with this process, but in no way could we. Because our process doesn't involve a revitalization program, it doesn't really meet the needs of this ARPA funding. But the important thing to know at the end of our process, our demolition process, the property owner retains ownership of the property. So we don't actually take ownership of the property. So the red properties are currently in the system. Hope to have those demolished by the end of the year. The yellow in general is the other vacant properties noted, and you'll see there's two different hatchings. There's a single hatch, and then there's a cross hatch or an X pattern. The single hatch, uh, we did what's called all these yellow ones, we did a windshield inspection, and the single hatch ones we've determined were nowhere near 50% damage. So there's not a whole lot we can do with our current demolition program. Whereas the properties in yellow that are crosshatched or an X pattern, we believe those can qualify. They're over 50% damaged with regard to its market value of the structure. Don't know that for sure completely because we haven't actually gone through the administrative warrant process that would allow us to enter the building and determine that damage. But that's the nuts and bolts behind the cross hatching and the hatching and the red. It's really more for our own internal use while we're trying to do take down structures using our own demolition program.
Thanks, Bill. And just to add to that, and Maud, please follow up if you have any further questions. So again, as Bill mentioned, and as you see across what you will see across the map, you'll see much more yellow than you will red. And again, the purpose of this RFI is because red is what you see here is what the county is really limited to. Yellow is what is the opportunity that's presented, right? So what you see in yellow are vacant and abandoned properties, regardless of their level of demolition, have the potential to be acquired, right, by interested parties, potential applicants. They're able to be acquired, demolished, and revitalized. So what you're seeing here, you see a much more condensed groupings according to in certain areas where it makes revitalization much more impactful, and just a much more feasible project for those neighborhoods. by identifying these vacant properties, which is data that's being collected by TPW as they're going throughout the county, throughout qualified census tracts, and continually updating this map with additional vacant properties that have been identified.
And I would
So I'll stop
reiterate,
there.
Vicky, so that everybody's clear that the thresholds that St. Louis County is under in order to demolish a property is not the thresholds that a redeveloper or a developer would be under to acquire the vacant homes and do something different with them. So those are our ordinance requirements, but any of the vacant homes are frankly in a redevelopment opportunity, even homes that are not vacant, if there's, you know, an agreed upon situation between a developer and that property owner to acquire that property, lends itself a lot of opportunity for the development community to revitalize these areas in a impactful way.
Thank you, Stephanie. And as you'll see, there are like the data, the outlines, the yellow and the red that you see on the map right now. Well, obviously the TPW will be focusing on certain neighborhoods, and as they complete kind of broader windshield assessments of those neighborhoods, they'll move on to other neighborhoods. But again, this isn't a finalized and exhaustive list of vacant and abandoned properties. The county would also like to hear from you about any other potential neighborhoods that you would recommend or identify, or any other vacant and abandoned properties that you yourself or your organizations have identified that would fit within the purpose of this project. There's another question here. Do we believe multiple vendors will be awarded via the RFP process, or is it a desire for one vendor? Stephanie, I don't know if you want to take that one.
No, I don't know that we have a specific preference. We don't know what responses we're going to get. I think that we are open to considering what is best to lift the most with the funding that we have. So it's not predetermined. Certainly a good team, a solid team that brings value to the project in the area would be advantageous, but individual groups that could do the same would potentially be advantageous as well. We just want to maximize what we can do with the money and be as impactful as we can through this effort.
I also wanted to mention, if you have questions, because I'm sure yourselves may have ideas that expand well beyond what may be included as an example within the RFI or within this presentation. Please, if you have any questions surrounding potential eligibility or does this kind of fit within this project and the ordinance and the federal guidelines, please again send those questions along, and Bill is more than happy to follow up with you should you have any further questions around the scope of eligibility.
We also have one more question from Rachel about, she wanted to know, where does the vacant parcel data come from, and how does the county track this data?
That really comes from our residential inspection section, probably specifically more from our property maintenance inspectors, which are kind of a subsection of residential inspections. And it's they try to keep it on the radar because a lot of these properties become board ups, so they got to board up openings in the property to keep vandals out, keep children out of the structures. So we try to track these, and we're working on a kind of an overall list. This vacant properties fluctuates depending on one time I think we had up to 2,000 properties. Now we're down to more around 1,100 properties. So it is a visual inspection. Um, basically, that's how we track.
Last call for questions. If there aren't any more, as we've shared many times before, you can always reach out to Bill or via the RFI. And we're accepting written questions with respect to the RFI through July 14th, and we'll be publishing them for everybody. But we wanted to thank you all for taking some time out of your day to join us for this information session, and thank you for your interest in this opportunity. Great, and we'll go ahead and wrap up. If there are any more questions.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just noticed
yeah.
we had Calvin Scott raise their hand in the
Oh,
attendees.
okay, go ahead, sure. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Calvin.
Let me go and unmute him. Hang on just a moment.
Calvin Scott, of course. What is the contact information in terms of getting in touch with Bill? That's the person we to get in touch with.
Yes, well,
I'll pull that
Robert,
up again here, but go ahead, Bill.
And it's in the RFI, Calvin, as well. If you go to our website and you click on the RFI information, Bill's contact information is there.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. I got it.
All right then. Well, I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you. You too, likewise.
Thank you.
Bye.